Interested in media coverage with over 80,000 podcast playbacks per month, along with automated outreach to thousands of customized targets to grow your revenue more efficiently? With over $8 billion in new sales pipeline growth delivered to our partners so far, we can help. Please reach out for more information. Hey everybody, welcome to Freight Executive Insights. I'm Mike Vincent, and this is my very special guest, Ken Adamo. I'm so glad you came on the program. I wish I could have gotten you earlier on the program, but I'm really excited about it now. And by the way, I just got to give you out an OH.
IO
to begin with, right? We got to start it off. We got to start it off right because we got so much to talk to here. We only got about 25 minutes to do this because I know you're a busy man. But let's go, brother. For those who are living under a rock, Ken Adamo, explain to them who you are. I know who you are. I've known you for a number of years, and I follow you on LinkedIn. Love your stuff. Explain.
Yeah, I'm Chief of Analytics over here at DAT. I've been here for about 5 years, coming up on 5 years. Prior to that, I was at FedEx, doing the custom critical, moving the polar bears and sea turtles around, but also doing their truckload brokerage pricing, the priority air freight. So I've been in and around the industry, in and around DAT for about 10 plus years. All things analytics, data science, industry analysis. I most recently picked up Corp Dev here at DAT, which has been a super fun addition to my day-to-day. So out there shopping for companies that may or may not be on the market, partnerships, and then strategic alliances. So it keeps me busy. And it's a super exciting time, I think. It's always exciting to be in freight and logistics, but I think now more than ever as we crawl out of this market cycle.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a difficult one to crawl out of if you ask me, because the peak wasn't natural, so that makes it a little bit different. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, 49-month freight cycle is a little bit longer than average. 22 months of expansion, 27 months of contraction. I think on the average, if you hauled an even amount of freight, you're about 20% up versus prior cycles, which is good. I always say, a lot of people are new to this industry. You and I aren't, but a lot of people are. And maybe this is the first freight cycle they've seen. It's like, play it in reverse. Would you be feeling as sad and depressed as you are right now if the cycle would have happened in reverse? The answer is no, but it's human psychology to have a recency bias. So this one stunk. But I was in the industry still. I was getting out, but I was in the industry at 2019, and that wasn't very much fun either.
No, 2019 sucked, and that's what a lot of people don't remember. I mean, January, people were calling for rate floors.
On May 10th, 2020, the only time truckers have actually organized in front of the White House. Trump, commented in his press conference that he heard the trucker horns out in front of the White House. And then pretty much from that day forward, it was a rocket ship into that bull run that was unlike anything we'd ever seen. So it's been a wacky 8 years, would you call it? 7 or 8 years in freight.
Yeah, it has. It has been crazy because it began with the tariffs. 2018, we had that bump, right, from the tariffs and the pull forward and stuff. And then that 19 was just has not been normal since.
Yeah, I mean, I go back to 16 was not a great year to be in freight. You had a lot of the tier one automakers making some pretty major pivots. You saw the coming online of a lot of foreign automakers taking tax abatements in Mississippi, Georgia, Alabama, and Southern Tennessee.
Yeah.
So, we got into 17, and then we had, like, a lot of people say that hurricanes don't change freight cycles, which I totally agree with, because once all that's done, it all goes away. But there's a but there. Harvey was a unique monster in that Houston isn't a typical hitting Houston and sitting there for a couple of days, and that was a 100-year storm, isn't the same impact as hitting Tampa, which is prepared for this. So, I think you had Harvey and Irma, and then you had the ELD mandate going into effect. And then, like you just mentioned, we had the Trump era tax cuts and quantitative easing, which the economy into an absolute, it was like jet fuel for the economy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think if we just keep going back, because then you can go back to the housing crisis, 2008, 2009. It's never normal. It's always volatile, and there's always something to point to that is impacting transportation, right? I mean, just now, I was talking to Carmen Glick. She's the CEO of Ship Forward. Immediately after the election, all Asia to U.S. Maritime capacity all bought up, rates going through the roof, just immediately. So you're already seeing this impact that has happened.
I filled up for 250 a gallon this morning.
What's that?
I filled up for 250 a gallon. It was 325 pre-election. So, yeah, I think
Yeah, no, I know, and I was at about the same yesterday. Yeah,
yeah. So it's I think on the margins, this administration, and again, studying pre-inauguration administrative policies is a fool's errand. I don't think there's any
yeah,
you shouldn't
that's
you
true.
shouldn't do too
Sure.
much there. But from what this administration is, the incoming administration is saying, I think it should be very bullish for freight, at least in the first 2 years of the administration, right?
Yeah,
Um, I think if we continue to see, especially corporate tax cuts, but then also I think parking some of this just asinine regulation that had been bouncing around. I think that'll go a long way to helping the freight economy as well.
right. So where do you see this? Where do you see this climb? Right, because we've come off of this unnatural high, and as bullish as it was, and and like you even said, it was this rocket, this meteoric rise, right? But none of that was natural, right? I mean, well, a good the volume of it wasn't natural, right? If you look at that, the frequency of it. So where is or the amplitude of it? So where does this peak go to? Does it go to 219 to the top of before the, or do we reach
No,
again?
no. I mean, prior to the election, my view was that this was going to be like a 2013 to 2017 cycle.
Okay.
So that, if you remember that was kind of it capped out at about 15 to 20% year over year positive, and then bottomed out about 10 to 15% year over year negative. That was the totality of the cycle. I
Yeah.
ran a bunch of modeling. I posted about this last week. I
Yeah.
think, people forget, and I think some of it's partisan politics and some of it's like tax cuts are fairly unsexy. But I think a lot of people forget that the Trump's first term, the personal tax cuts that happened in the first year and a half of that presidency
Hmm.
drove a lot of spending in consumer durables. What are consumer durables? Those are products that are expected to last more than a year or two. Washing machines, other home appliances, you name it, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And that drives if you want to and I say this to people a lot, if you really want to know what's happening like 6 to 9 months down the road, go talk to like someone from Whirlpool, right? Someone from
Right.
like the appliance manufacturers, because they
The
really have
yeah
a
the
bead.
the durable goods.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so we saw an influx of durable goods. So again, I think people they think of the hurricanes, they think of ELDs, they forget what persisted that bull run there was um, the Trump tax cuts. So I don't want to model against another 100-year pandemic, but I do think there's probably a non-trivial chance that this next cycle closely mirrors 13 to 17, which would be very, very good for freight, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. 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 Well, I see it as a very positive. It looks like it's going to be a very positive, but how high that positive goes is one of the questions, right? I mean, what happens on the world stage, et cetera. But all like you said, you can't count on pre-administration policy because the tariffs were never taken away. I mean,
yeah,
they stayed, right? There's predictions that will be false, which is very interesting. So over the weekend, I was watching some interesting things, and some people pointed out that um, we have a new Department of Transportation secretary.
that's right.
what, what are your thoughts on on that? Who will be? Do you think, or who should be?
I think who will be. I have a very low trust in government. My two principles with government are you can trust them to get nothing done, and if they do get something done, you can trust them to get it wrong.
Right.
Um, so my guess is it'll be some apparatchik from God knows where.
Yeah.
Um, I think what you're talking about is Craig Fuller's been making a pretty self-proclaimed push to be in that seat. And
Well,
look, Craig and I have had,
he's gaslighting and he's screwing around. I know Craig. Well, he's half and half. I mean, I know Craig, so
yeah,
he's pushing for it. He wants it. You better believe he does. But he'll also say, "Well, I was just screwing around." At the same time,
yeah. I mean, I think he and I have had some very on-record public disagreements about things over the years, and I think
sure,
though, if you told me would I if it was a public election, would I cast my vote for the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, or a
yeah,
guy that probably spent a large portion of playing with his toys in the corner of a U.S. Express CEO office? I think I might take the guy with diesel in his veins. Um,
So that's a vote towards Craig Fuller.
yeah, and I think like in reality, who would I like to see? He's probably a little too old for the job at this point, to be totally honest with you. But I think in the last time Trump, if you remember the news cycle, the last time Trump was elected, Fred Smith went to visit. The founder of FedEx went to visit with
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
President-elect Trump in New York, and there were talks at the time. Again, I was working at FedEx. There were talks at the time within the four walls that they were actually vetting Fred for uh, the Secretary of Defense, which sounds crazy, but he has distinguished military service, and the military is largely the world's largest supply chain function, right? If you think about it.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
and look, again, I think Fred's probably a little bit old in the years to be taking up a job like that. He's been ratcheting down his role at FedEx, but someone like that, Derek Leathers, again, I don't know if these folks want to step away from powerful positions at publicly traded companies, but you think of Derek Leathers, Shelley Simpson, those type of folks. But that's not how government works. You pick someone who, especially in these like, people just don't care enough about supply chain.
Well,
It's
I
the reason
mean,
our airports aren't fixed, our roads aren't fixed.
I know, as cool and sexy as it became, and we like to tell ourselves it became. You're right. It is not as interesting as people pretend it is, or the headlines would show it to be. You're right.
Yeah.
It's a difficult thing, but I mean, look at try. I mean, he pulled Elon Musk out of the private sector, right? But I guess Elon was doing that anyways. He was pushing his way that way, and so maybe that's what gives a Craig Fuller or someone like a Craig Fuller the shot to go in there, because Trump does like to pull from the private sector.
I mean, from what I understand through his venture activities, Craig has attachment to the VP. Look, I mean, could Craig like shoot for the moon and end up in an advisory committee reporting into the secretary as a private sector advisory committee? Yeah, I think someone asked that on Twitter or LinkedIn the other day. Like, who would you put in a business roundtable or a private sector advisory committee? I had Craig on that list.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that makes sense.
and I think, look, that this if we learn nothing from the last two cycles, then like shame on us. If the next major disruption that comes down the pike continues to be this like unfettered roller coaster for 2.5 years, then like shame on us. And I don't think government intervention is particularly the way, but I think there's a huge problem around fraud and driver safety in this country, and there's nothing really being done about that at the regulatory level.
Yeah, at the regulatory level. I mean, obviously, there's some really good products that are out there. I mean, Jordan Graft running Highway out there is doing a pretty good job. It's some great technology out there. So the private sector, I think, is working on that. But I mean, to your point, there we have all these new, and I dare say nascent, but you have all these new technologies, and visibility is actually becoming quite good with many new products and people developing all of these interactive. And just excellent ways to integrate with different technologies, right? From the technologies that Qt is doing on the appointment levels, et cetera, right? And Highway is doing with the vetting of carriers and fraud and that sort of thing. But then also your ship forwards and your fetch goats, et cetera, that are bringing all this data together. I mean, it sounds to me like you would be implying that there needs to be a way to collaborate those and bring them together to work towards a more national security of the supply chain, right? Because it is a matter of national security, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those companies are doing great work. And I'm not saying any of them should be pushed out, but I also think like it's easier to find out if you're going to get food poisoning from a food truck nowadays than if the carrier that's going to put, you're going to put $1 million worth of freight and 80,000 pounds of steel rolling down the road is going to be safe. Like the FMCSA, whether you're pro or against government or how your thoughts come up there, the FMCSA is currently and has been for a long time failing at their primary job, which is
Mm-hmm.
providing information that a carrier is legitimate and safe to operate on the roads. That is, in my opinion, an inarguable statement that the FMCSA, the organization whose name and charge is to determine federal motor carrier safety, is not
Yeah.
doing that. And I think as participants in the supply chain and as taxpayers, corporate and private, like I feel like I am entitled, whether I'm driving my personal car down the road or a portion of my business's revenue are going to the government. to be told whether or not that carrier is or is not safe based on a commonly accepted definition.
So how do they improve that though? Where do they go to improve that? Do they adopt the private equity or the private industry technology like your highways, et cetera, or does it go further than that? Because highways, that's fraud, right? Safety is a completely different situation.
Yeah,
Is it the misappropriation of efforts towards autonomy and not taking that autonomous all the technologies on autonomy and applying them to a human driven vehicle and adding all those safety features?
I think like all things where we've made progress in government, it is the public and private sector working together to make advances in a particular area, and it just has to become important enough. We've done it with our food safety and food supply, right?
Yeah,
No one's afraid now that they're going to get trichinosis from a pack of pork chops. Like we've come a very
right,
long way in a very short time, in my opinion. Over the long arc of time, we've come a very long way in all of these areas, and a lot of that has just been, in collaboration with Smithfield and Swift and Purdue, right? In that particular instance. So I think
sure,
on the trucking side, it's much more fragmented, which is I think something that a lot of folks don't always come to that conclusion right away, but it's still a truth that's always in the back of our mind. I think the top 10% carriers still don't make up a material portion of the freight that's moving out there. So
right.
I think I don't have a great answer. I think it starts with modernization. I think it starts with better private partner collaboration. And I think it starts with modernization too, right? The first and third point being, um,
Well, I get where you're going with this, and in my mind, what you're kind of saying is that because there's such a low barrier to entry into the trucking market, it's really hard to control who's in there and where that safety is, and to bring them into the technology that allows and the collaboration that allows those examples you said, like in the food industry, to occur. Right? I mean, if anybody could just up and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to start a chicken farm and start selling," chicken thighs, etc. It'd be very difficult to control that market, right? But you just can't do that. The barrier to entry is much harder than buying a couple year old Cascadia or whatever and a trailer and getting your MC number
buying
and
your
roll
MC
it
number
roll
off of
and
someone with 2 or 3 years of service and getting it transferred to you so you're up and running, right?
dude,
Um,
I bought one online for $250. It was 12 years old.
yeah,
Yeah.
so that's the thing, right? Well, could the FMCSA implement, and again, not to just go acronym soup, could the FMCSA implement some sort of multi-factor authentication for new motor carrier numbers? Yeah, sure they could.
Yeah.
And again, this doesn't have to be an app, right? Like they've been doing, even though it wasn't called that and it wasn't like a sexy app, they've been doing multi-factor authentication for your tax returns for over a decade, right? You have your PIN now, especially at the state
Yep.
level. Though, sure, it might slow you down. You might not be up and running in an afternoon, but if they have to mail you a PIN to your address on file and you have to open that up and put it, that's how the tax returns used to go. Now it's kind of bank deposits of to a small amount. Like those things can all happen, and we just don't. Again, I maybe with this, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but I listen to Matthew Leffler a lot. Maybe with the sunsetting of Chevron doctrine and the FMCSA has to focus more on safety and fraud and all of that, we'll get more advancement, but we'll see.
Yeah. Those are excellent points. Okay, last question, dude. What's your prediction for the Ohio State Indiana game?
35-17 Ohio State.
Excellent. I love it, my friend. I love it, my friend. What's new on the horizon for you, brother? Anything exciting coming up?
No, like I said, I'm just kind of stretching my legs a little bit with the new role. We've got some new product things coming down the pike. I'm really looking forward to getting into next year. Getting some tailwinds would be really, really nice.
Yeah.
You know how it goes. It's going to slow down no matter what. After like January 15th, it'll be a slow February.
Winter happens every year, brother.
Doom and gloomers will be out. And then I think once we get into, late February, early March, if it's a mild winter, we'll have a strong produce season and we'll be ready to rock and roll here in the spring. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. Excellent stuff, my friend. I really appreciate coming on, my friend. Peace and love.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Right on. Right on. Hey, everybody. Welcome or thank you for tuning into FEI. It's been great having you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace and love.